when I first started to study asylum into Turkey, it was roughly when the Berlin Wall was coming down. And never in my wildest dream would I have thought that one day there would be a conference on migration and Turkey of the size that I find myself in. So I must congratulate and also thank the organizers of this conference. It's a great opportunity for me to be here. I am especially grateful that I'm invited here because I have been for almost 3 years struggling with this paper that I will present to you. It was about late in 2008 that in the dark streets of Izmir, on the margins of a training program organized by the police, that I was approached by two what we call mülkiye müfettişi. These are special inspectors in Turkey that have the authority to even challenge ministers themselves. And they approached me in rather what I would call Cold War espionage circumstances, wanting to learn about the Turkish asylum practices of the past and the current one. They had been appointed by the then Minister of Interior, Beşir Atalay, who is a professor of law, on the heels of a Human Rights Watch report called Revolving Doors, written by a good and a very old friend of mine called Bill Frelick, a long-time expert on refugee issues in Washington, D.C. And this particular report was a damning report, tearing apart Greece and Turkey's detention practices of irregular migrants. Subsequently, the Council of Europe published a report by Thomas Hammerberg, again extremely critical of Turkey's asylum practices, particularly in terms of access to status determination, detention conditions, and a deterioration in the practice of refoulements, a violation of the non-refoulement principle. The Turkish asylum practice, for time restrictions, very briefly, I call it a two-tiered asylum practice. It's a two-tiered asylum practice because Turkey was amongst the drafters of the 1951 Geneva Convention and accepted the convention with a geographical limitation. In other words, Turkey is only obligated to extend refugee status to people who are fleeing events in Europe. Those who are fleeing events in Europe are only entitled to temporary protection in Turkey, and Turkey is not bound to extend fully fledged protection in the form of refugee status. And Turkey currently is, amongst all the countries in the world receiving asylum applications, the 10th. Last year it was 14, it's come up 10, and amongst 44 industrial countries that UNHCR lists, Turkey, I believe, is the 5th or 6th. Between 1995 and 2010, almost 78,000 applications have taken place. Almost 40,000 of them have been recognized and overwhelmingly resettled from outside Turkey. And this practice is the second tier, mostly people coming from outside Europe. The number of people coming from within Europe between these dates is only 266, mostly Chechens and some other nationals who are members of the Council of Nationals of countries. The only legislation beyond the Geneva Convention came in 1994 in the form of the asylum regulation, with a very long-winded title and clearly a regulation. I know the person in person who prepared it behind extremely closed doors, very national security oriented. This piece of legislation provoked major reactions from the international human rights circles, but also the American Congress, the European Parliament, Council of Europe, for provoking the violation of the non-refoulement principle there. From 1997 onwards, the UNHCR single-handedly, well before the EU was anywhere around, initiated a reform process. I won't go into the details of it. If you're interested, you're welcome to ask questions. And that reform process relatively improved the Turkish asylum practices. And then came onto the scene the European Union and its accession partnership document listing all the homework that Turkey needed to do to one day join the European Union. What it expected Turkey to do, the European Union, in 2001 with the first accession partnership document, was basically to adopt the first and the coming second generation of asylum acquis within the European Union, develop an asylum authority as well as a fully fledged asylum law, not to mention the lifting of the geographical limitation as well. And the Turkish bureaucracy, basically the Turkish National Police, or what we call Emniyet Genel Müdürlüğü, rolled up their sleeves, and I'm very fortunate and privileged that I was privy to all these processes that I was referring to, or from the sidelines, not from the inside, rolled up their sleeves and contributed to the preparation of the national program for the adoption of the acquis, subsequently the action program on asylum and migration. Basically, they committed themselves to adopting this acquis and meeting the requirements of their homework, with the promise of lifting the geographical limitation on the condition that there would be some form of a burden sharing practice. On the part of the TNP, the Turkish National Police, we see the adoption of shy but clear steps towards the implementation of these promises in the form of circulars. The way it works in Turkey, you have laws, you have the constitution, we can debate it, put that aside, and then you have laws, and then yönetmelik regulations to implement that law, and then circulars at the level of bureaucracies that sometimes is difficult to access for the public. The most central one, critical one, came in 2006, and it was pure and simple a translation of the qualification directive of the European Union, with some minor tweaks and changes here and there to suit the Turkish practice. Yet that very year, in December 2006, the European Council, the highest body of the European Union, adopted a decision to suspend the prospects of opening up 8 chapters as long as Turkey would not extend the customs union rules to Cyprus. And then a number of other chapters, including the chapter that deals with asylum issues, chapter 24, was informally blocked by Cyprus and France. And this is the point at where we begin to see the Turkish National Police, as well as the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a secondary bureaucracy of importance, turning into what the Europeanization literature calls veto players. Here, very quickly, I'd like to share 2 anecdotes to give you an idea of what form this veto playing takes. The second in command of the section that deals with asylum in the Turkish National Police was on a study trip organized by, I think, UNHCR or one of the NGOs, probably the International Catholic Migration Committee. I have the details if you're interested in it, to Hungary. to study how a country that had the geographical limitation lifted it. And the second in command, a very close colleague and friend, asked his Hungarian counterpart, saying, how on earth did you manage to engage the financial and political costs of such a reform? And the second in command is reflecting on this to me, and he said, my heart sank when my Hungarian counterpart said, no problem, because we never hesitated that we were going to be a member of the European Union. And you can imagine the consequences of that on a person, bureaucrat, that was enthusiastic about reform in the first place. The second one is his counterpart in the Foreign Ministry directing the section that deals with migration and asylum at a meeting with the UNHCR, simply saying that they're going to adopt those parts of the accession process that suits Turkey and ignore the ones that only benefit the European Union. Yet in 2008, the process changed dramatically. And this is the bit that fascinates me. These two inspectors were appointed to a new body called something like Migration Unit. And at the head of this unit, they embarked upon a fascinating and maybe unique open process of consultations with NGOs, with international organizations, including the UNHCR, as well as traveling to the European Commission in Brussels, asking them about what is expected from them, and then exchanging the drafts they had prepared with them. But much more importantly, they also went to Strasbourg and consulted with the very judges that had been passing these damning judgments, rulings of the European Court of Human Rights in respect to Turkish violations of the convention that relate to asylum issues. They completed their draft law in January 2011, and this was submitted to the public in a conference organized by the UNHCR. And in the meantime, you will hear in other panels, we'll be having here the details of it. The law went through the legislative process, it cleared all the committee level work, and is now sitting in to be taken care of at the plenary level. It's still yet to be adopted. Now, my puzzlement, and the one that I have been struggling to deal with, is how to explain the preparation of a law that, if adopted, will meet all the requirements of the European Union, with the exception of the lifting of the geographical limitation at a time when Turkey has no prospects of admission as a member to the European Union. And in 2009, October, at a conference at Koç University on these topics, one of the medium-level officials working with this team walked up to me and said, Hocam, Prof, these decisions are raining on us and the situation is untenable. We have to do something about it, and we have to do something about it turned into developing and completing I'm finishing last sentence. Completing the draft law. And the leader of this team, I'd like to quote this following sentence that may give you an idea of the logic of appropriateness in operation. We do these things for ourselves because it is only such a law that would live up to a Turkey that has become the 16th largest economy in the world, and also for the value attributed to the European Court of Human Rights rulings and the embarrassment that comes with it. Yet, the proof of the pudding, is that the expression? Is obviously the adoption of the law and then the actual implementation of it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.